Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon and happy Thursday. We were just joking before the call started how punctual this group is. I think there were maybe 100 or 200 of you in the waiting room before the top of the hour, so thank you. We appreciate that. We'll go nice and slow in the first minute or two as more of you enter the room. Uh, we're honored to have such a large group today, especially so many of our nonprofit members and community as well. Before we officially start the presentation, we first want to say that we hope you had a very successful Giving Tuesday and all of your end of year campaigns went well and smooth, and that you're off to a very fast start in 2026. Can't believe January is already almost over. Um, I'll
Think we
say we're
have
gonna,
to.
yeah, I'll say maybe another minute or two. So grab a notepad if you're like me, pour a fresh cup of coffee. While we await, my name is Mike. I'm an account manager with Give Lively. I'm based in New York on Long Island. We'd love to have you in the chats, maybe say where you're calling in from, the name of your nonprofit. And I think a lot of you had joined our Giving Tuesday prep webinar at the end of last year. This is our first major webinar of the year, and we have a lot more to come, so keep an eye out for future emails. As far as today goes, we're very excited and happy to welcome our newest partner, Chariot, as our guest speaker. And as you can see here, today's webinar is all about unlocking DAFs and unlocking DAF giving in 2026. We have a lot to cover today. There's a very content-rich presentation. Plus, we want to save some time for Q&A at the end. But we do have a few housekeeping items to review before we officially start. So you've probably noticed this, but your cameras and microphones are off, but we would absolutely love for you to engage with us. So there's a Q&A field. Any questions that you all have, whether it's about the Give Lively platform, the actual integration, DAFs in general, we have the Give Lively team and the Chariot team behind the scenes that will help answer those questions. We'll respond to as many as we possibly can. And if we don't get to all of them, we'll make sure to follow up with you all after the call. Also, in the chats, please keep an eye out for links that pop up, polls. We'll share also related articles and other related content. The polls are not required, but we would appreciate if you all could try to attempt to answer those questions. It'll help guide the conversation. If you like what you hear, use the reaction buttons. That's always a great way to engage with us. And I think most importantly, this call will absolutely be recorded. You'll receive a copy after the presentation ends today, and we'll share some other related articles as well. We have two amazing speakers. Mitch Stein, who is the head of strategy at the Chariot, and we also have our amazing CEO, David D. Paralisa. So I'm going to pass it off to David right now.
Thanks so much, Mike. And thank you all for joining. It's so amazing to see so many of you interested in helping people give, right? And making giving easier. So, really excited to introduce, for those of you less familiar with Give Lively, a little bit about us. We are an organization that's been around for a little over 10 years. And through our entire life, we've been free for nonprofits. We've not charged nonprofits any money to use our services, which is part of what we are, part of our charter, part of our ability to give back to all of you. Much of what we do is oriented towards our values, and our values are to help those who are helping others, and to support you in all the ways that make this country a better place. We're U.S. based, and we're really happy to support many thousands of organizations across the United States. The platform that we offer is secure. We take security and privacy very seriously, and we don't sell data. We ensure that your donors' information is safe and that you have access to it. And that also is implied in our transparency. We try to be as open and honest about what we're doing as we can. And then fundamentally, what we're doing is offering a platform that makes giving easy, speedy, and frictionless. And so we've created ways to make giving as easy as buying a cup of coffee. And really excited that DAF Pay may become another version of that sort of ease by which you can inspire people to give. So very briefly, what has Give Lively accomplished in its last 10 years? Well, We have over 9,000 active nonprofits who've raised money just last year across the United States. Nonprofits big and small, we're really here for orgs of all sizes. We have a special sweet spot for smaller organizations who we feel like we can offer exceptional services to. So we're excited to see a lot of you here on this call. We've helped nonprofits raise $1.4 billion, which is a mind-boggling number. Over 11 million individual donations and no money at all charged to those orgs in order to do that fundraising. All in all, we think we've contributed back to the nonprofit community through the cost savings we've offered over $130 million in funding that otherwise would have gone to for-profit or VC funded entities and not to service. So we're really excited and happy that we've been able to offer this to you. And so we're also excited to say, one of the next things we're able to do to help you all is to offer a DAF Pay option. And we'll talk more about what DAF Pay is for those who are less familiar, but just to show you who are Give Lively members, what that looks like. When someone's making a donation on a donation page on Give Lively, you see a variety of payment methods. Many of you have seen credit or bank payments, Google or Apple Pay, PayPal, and now DAF, Donor Advised Fund Giving, another button amongst a button with a lot of power underneath it, amongst a bunch of other really easy to use options. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mitch at Chariot to describe a little bit more about the world of DAF. And thank you again for attending. And off to you, Mitch. Thanks.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me, David, and Give Lively team. And thank you to the hundreds of people in the chat. This is so fun. I really feel the sense of community that you all are building over there amongst your members. So thank you for inviting me. And it's an honor to be speaking with everybody. I'm going to start off just introducing myself and a little bit about what I do and what Chariot's up to. And then we're going to dive into a lot of information around donor advised funds, how they work, what you need to know about them, how you can engage with them more. And I'm just excited to share that with you all. And please, please, please bring lots of questions. That's what we're here for. There's a lot of you, so we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. And if you have lingering questions, feel free to reach out to me or the team afterwards. So excited to dive in. So Chariot, you can really think about us as your go-to for DAFs in the nonprofit space. I like to break up the work that we do into these three key pillars. Number one here is around education. So we spend a ton of our time and my own time in particular doing research and sharing that out to the nonprofit community in sessions like this here, at large conferences. We do original research. We'll talk a lot about our DAF fundraising report that we're now in the third iteration of this year. But we also do a lot of direct promotion, just trying to drive increased DAF activity and DAF giving, most notably DAF Day, which hopefully many of you have heard about. We just had our second iteration of that in October. So we can speak more about that in a bit. We also drive just increased coverage and awareness in the press. And all of that underlying all these efforts is our investments in technology, both how we can drive more DAF giving with a DAF payment option that can be integrated in amazing tools like Give Lively, but also other things to help the industry. Like we launched a solution for grant makers to send electronic payments to nonprofits through the Chariot platform called Disbursements. So more to come from us. We're really narrowly focused on this part of the market. And excited to keep helping you all and solve problems around DAFs. So our agenda today, what I'm going to cover is starting off with some of the basics, the DAF 101, making sure everyone feels good about the topic and what it is and why we're here discussing it. Then I'm going to share some of those research findings, the latest trends, what matters most to fundraisers and nonprofits. There's a lot of information out there, so we try to really curate what you need to be paying attention to maximize your fundraising and achieving all of your missions. Next is taking it to that next level. So once we understand how DAFs work and what's going on with them, what can we do within our organization? What are some tangible steps we can take to drive more DAF giving? And then we'll finish with some next steps, Q&A, and just here to help anyone. So please keep dropping those questions into the Q&A as we go along. Okay, so we want to start off. There's a lot of you. I want to know how everyone feels about this topic before we jump in. So if we can kick off the poll, the first question we have is a simple, do you know what a DAF is? Yes or no? And it's totally fine if you don't, that's why we're here. But then the second level question I'd love to understand from everybody is how comfortable would you feel explaining what a DAF is to a donor? So beyond just that you feel comfortable with the topic, how comfortable would you feel talking to another important person, like a supporter of your mission, about donor advised funds? So we'll give it a minute here. See how everyone's answering. And I'd be curious too in the chat if folks just have a word that comes to mind when they hear donor advised funds or DAFs. What's free word association? What's the first word that comes to mind when you hear DAFs? Have that running on the side. Awesome. There's a lot of, so people, strong opinions in both directions. People are excited, there's growth, they're confused. Awesome. Okay, we've got it all. This is great. Well, maybe if we can go ahead and wrap up the poll. I feel like we've probably given people a minute now to answer and see what our results were. All right, so almost 90% of you, wow, hundreds of you voting on this. This is amazing. Feel good that you know what a DAP is. That's great. But when we get to the comfort level with actually explaining it to someone else and someone else that's important to us, a lot less comfort. So we see a pretty good distribution across, but we want to move everybody, no matter where you were on that scale, let's move you up a level by the end of this webinar. Let's give you like 1 point higher comfort level in explaining to someone else and go practice and see if you feel better once you've had a conversation. Be with a coworker, a family member, try to explain to them what a DAF is. This is great. All right, so we're going to jump into DAFs 101. I'll be pulling in a lot of the words that you all shared around taxes, around endowed funds. We're going to clarify all of that. I always come back to this chart or simple graphic whenever someone wants to know what a DAF is, because there's these 3 key elements and some simple flows between them. So you've got donors that use a donor advised fund account. They contribute funds into that account, and funds or assets, maybe they're donating some stock or other types of appreciated assets, and they receive that tax benefit in the same year that they make the contributions into their DAF if they claim that benefit. Once those funds are in the account, they're invested in the market, they're growing with the market, and the donor continues to recommend grants out of the DAF to the nonprofits that they want to support. So technically, once the funds go into that donor advised funds account, the entity that is the sponsor or the DAF provider now technically owns those funds. They are responsible for them. That's how they got the tax write-up when they did, because a C3 eligible nonprofit, which all DAF sponsors have to be, has taken control or custody of those funds. But you can continue making recommendations on where those should be granted and when, but that is technically a recommendation. Now, if it's an eligible organization and you have enough money to cover the grant, by and large, that is getting approved by the grant maker. I also like to compare this function for people that are new to the topic to something like a 401k for their retirement, or maybe if they've ever heard of an HSA, a health savings account for their healthcare expenses. Both of these are tax-advantaged accounts with a restricted use where the funds, once you put them in there, are invested in the market. What's really important about DAFs that's different from those other two is that it is irrevocable, meaning once you put money into a DAF account, there's no retrieving those funds for general use. The only way it can leave the DAF account is as a donation to an eligible nonprofit organization. And it's really important to the psychology and dynamics of using a DAF. You also have restricted use around this account, meaning you can only make gifts that are eligible. So if you are going to a gala fundraiser, for example, you can't buy a table with your DAF. That is not eligible. but general donations by and large are eligible. So it's something important to keep in mind. There are many different types of donor advised funds accounts that people can have. There are the largest in terms of number of providers is community foundations, over 750. So almost every community foundation around the country has a DAF program. It's great to be familiar with your local community foundation to your organization and know about their program. The largest in terms of number of donors and total assets are often referred to as commercial DAFs. These are DAF programs that sit alongside a financial institution. These are Fidelity Charitable, Schwab Charitable, which is now known as DAF Giving 360, Vanguard Charitable, et cetera. There are also things called single issue DAFs. Those are often religiously affiliated or maybe even affiliated with a hospital or a university, large nonprofits that even manage their own DAF program internally. In the last category, I refer to them generally as national DAFs, but these are unaffiliated with these other entities that I've described, but growing very quickly and often more tech forward. So that's things like GoFundMe launched a DAF program, a DAF offering for their users. There's a platform called Daffy that many of you have probably gotten gifts from, CharityVest, et cetera. So it's a growing space. There's more entrants. And I think it's valuable to understand the spectrum of types of providers, because it can also tell you something about your donor too, and how you want to engage with them. So you might be wondering, now you understand the structure and where these accounts can live, but why exactly do donors use them? Say the number one piece of feedback that we get and hear from people that are using donor advised funds is that it greatly streamlines their giving. They've got one account, one place that they think of managing their giving from. They get one tax receipt from when they make the contributions into their DAF, and then can easily handle the grants out of it and not have to track receipts after the fact. Because donations out of a donor advised fund, that is not a tax deductible gift. You already received the tax benefit when you contributed to the account. And having that one portal and one view is really helpful. And it's, a simple portal you can log into and manage. It's not a lot of admin or overhead. But then I think once people start using it, they start to feel the benefits on their generosity. It's really easy to set goals. You can automate when you want to make gifts into the account or grants out of the account. You're really pre-committing funds that are now restricted, right? There's no takesies, backsies. It ultimately has to go to charity. And that really changes people's connection to that money. They're way more willing to give it because it's already set aside for that purpose. I like to think about gift cards as a good comparison. When you have a gift card, you're then looking for ways to spend it. When you walk into a store, you're like, how much is on this? Right? And then you're looking for something of that value. There's a similar shift when a donor has a DAF. And last, which I know a lot of people mentioned, is yes, there are definitely tax benefits to using a DAF, especially if you are a wealthier individual or setting up a larger DAF account. I, for example, use a DAF, but I'm not putting enough into it that I actually disclose it on my taxes. I just feel the benefits of these first 2 points. But those 3 levels of tax savings that you might hear about, number one is that if you contribute into the account, you can write that full amount off of your taxes in that year. You also can avoid capital gains taxes that you might owe if you're contributing an appreciated asset, a share of NVIDIA that's gone through the roof. So you can avoid that extra tax bill, and the money invested in the account is growing tax-free. Awesome. So it's also helpful to think about behind the DAF name and the DAF account. These are people. Like, these are individuals supporting your mission, and there's a wide spectrum of folks that are using a DAF. And so they could be using that account for any number of reasons and use it in different ways. But I feel like there's generally 3 buckets of what I'll call archetypes that are helpful to keep in mind to think about your DAF donors and what they're like and what their motivations are. On the far left, and I've named these by the key benefit that they get from using a DAF. On the far left, I call this the organizer. This is me. So this is someone who is not contributing huge sums of money, but they're a consistent, dedicated giver that wants to be proactively engaged with their philanthropy. They want to be setting money aside for giving, setting goals, budgeting around their giving, and it's a really convenient tool to do that. I also have a DAF through my employer. So it's a benefit, much like a 401k or HSA, but actually through my employer, so that I get contributions into my DAF account matched each month, which is really cool, super helpful, and an increasing trend at companies as an alternative to individual gift matching. Now, in the middle, called this the optimizer. This is kind of moving up the wealth spectrum a bit to someone who is actually trying to strategically contribute some appreciated stock, or planning a larger DAF contribution in a year where maybe they got a bigger bonus or they sold the house. They have some tax liability that they're trying to offset. They're really planning. It's often done as a couple together. And these types of folks are generally like putting larger sums into their DAF and then doing spending that out on their grant making over the course of a few years, as opposed to me that's like funding and giving in the same year. Then on the far right, I've called this the builder, but this, you can really think about people using DAFs as an alternative to a private foundation, because it's way simpler. And if they've had some type of windfall event, right, they've sold a business, an IPO of a company, something like that, they are able to set up a long-term vehicle to manage their giving, but without all of the overhead and admin related to managing your own private foundation. So we're seeing that more and more people opting for a DAF account in lieu of a private foundation, unless they need the structure of that foundation to, execute on what they're trying to do. For most people, if you're just trying to make grants and you don't need to hire people or manage a staff, then they're opting for DAF accounts. Okay, cool. I'll pause there. If there's anyone on the team, there a question that was coming up that people felt like they needed more explanation on before we get to market trends, I'm happy to answer that now. Otherwise, we can keep going. No? Okay. Hopefully you're getting good answers in the Q&A and in the chat, as I see people super active. Awesome. So the reason we're having this conversation is not just because DAFs are cool and it's fun to learn about the ways that they can help people with their giving. It's because they are positively exploding. We just don't see movement and trends like this in philanthropy very often. And so looking at just the numbers from 2024, which were recently reported, that there was 65 billion in grants coming out of donor advised fund accounts, and the balance of funds that are already committed irrevocably to giving inside of DAFs is over 326 billion. Those are B's, capital B, billions of dollars. And that's just growing 5x over a 10-year period. That is such rapid change to everyone's giving. I also think it's important to flag that just the number of people using DAFs has skyrocketed, and that the average account size has gone down pretty precipitously. So what does that tell us? It's being democratized. You've got more and more people coming in as DAF users that are on the organizer end of the spectrum. And look, probably moving up, right? That's generally, people don't start out with all of the windfall assets and financial events, but the more and more people at a younger age are opting in to use DAFs, and it's really expanding this form of giving. So I also think it's important, as this is a dynamic part of the sector, there's constant headlines and updates that we want to pay attention to. And the numbers we have at the full industry level tend to lag a little bit. They are almost 2 years behind. So that number is old. And I know that this has continued to be growing. So it's likely even higher than that. So you look at some of the recent large DAF providers just last year when they reported their grant making, 25% year-over-year growth at Fidelity Charitable, the largest DAF in the country. 34% year-over-year growth at DAF Giving 360, which used to be Schwab Charitable, the second largest DAF in the country. So even at that scale, they're still growing at this rate annually. So important for us to be paying attention. We also have new entrants into the market. I mentioned this earlier, but GoFundMe launched like a direct-to-consumer DAF product within their donor portal and platform. And we've got the tax policy changing. And it's almost less relevant exactly what the changes are. The fact that there's changes has driven so much focus and conversation from financial advisors and anyone that is thinking about their philanthropy strategically. We just saw a huge increase in DAF account creation and usage in Q4 across all the DAF partners that we speak with. And certainly more and more companies adopting DAFs as an employee benefit, like I mentioned earlier. So all of this is driving just continued growth and activity level. Now, there also is a relatively new piece of research that Chariot leads with our partners at K2D Strategies called the DAF Fundraising Report. So this was our second annual. We're already working on the 2026 version. But what we do is actually analyze nonprofits' own data, their own donation records on how DAFs are impacting what they see from their individual donors. So we were able to analyze over 100 million transactions, over 12 billion in revenue, and understand really unique insights that you can only get from looking at the nonprofit's perspective to this activity. The report itself, there's a QR code right there. I highly recommend people take a look, and especially if you're really interested in this topic, there's so much information you can dig into there. So feel free to check that out. And I see that someone dropped the link into the chat, so appreciate you being all over it. So I'll run through just a couple of the biggest takeaways there. Like I said, there's a ton of information, key studies, templates, guides, et cetera, inside there. But the number one takeaway, and this is a very stark comparison when we look at what is the change in DAF revenue at nonprofit organizations and what is the change in non-DAF revenue. So people giving with DAFs and people that don't use DAFs for their giving. We are seeing the increase in DAF revenue accelerating over time, up to 30% in 2024, year over year, while the median change in non-DAF revenue was actually a slight decline. So while we're seeing somewhat flat giving levels with other giving methods, DAFs are skyrocketing and really making up for some of that, the losses in other types of giving, which is really important right now when the industry is generally under so much pressure. Another really important takeaway from that report is we were able to analyze, looking across hundreds of thousands of DAF donations, what are those gifts? How big are they? I think everybody historically thought about DAFs as major donors use these. It's huge gifts. That's the only place we need to think about it. Actually, we found quite the opposite. 69% of DAF donations analyzed were under $1,000. That means they could be coming through donation forms like Give Lively, right? It's just that people don't historically, before DAF Pay, didn't have a way to do that. And so now, knowing how many people want to be using DAFs for non-major gift category donations, it's so important to bring into the digital setting and make that clear and intuitive and seamless. Now, that's not to say that DAF giving at larger donation levels isn't common. It is, and it's growing. The point is that it just happens across the spectrum. But to me, this penetration of DAF giving at those kind of, depending on your organization, what you might deem mid-level or major level donors, is pretty staggering, that we're getting up to 15, 20+% of donors in those buckets using DAFs. Should tell you how important this is to your high value donors, along with the fact that many donors of different giving levels are wanting to use this tool. The other really important thing from that research is that we're able to tell what happens when a donor changes the way they give to use a DAF. Because I think some people might look at this prior slide and say, okay, well, yeah, wealthy people use DAFs, and so they're going to give the same through their DAF or not. Well, we are actually able to tell, because we look at the same donor's behavior changes over time with the same organization, what happens if David gave to the American Cancer Society in 2021 with a credit card, and then in 2022 started using a donor advised fund? What we're able to prove is that donors that change the way they give to start using a DAF on average, increased their gift size, same donor, same organization, 1 year later by 10x. And even when we don't look at averages, because those can be skewed by big outliers, those outliers are important and not to be discounted. But it's good to look at something like the median. Even the median was double what they gave the prior year. So more than half of your donors that switched the way they give from a credit card to a DAF, more than double their donation to your organization. Wow, right? How many tools and payment methods can offer that? But it's because of those unique dynamics.
Mitch, if you can hear me, this is Mike with Give Lively. We lost your audio.
Still nothing, Mitch. While Mitch is fixing headphones, I'll just say I find these particular slides to be the stars of the show. I mean, to have a DAF gift be so much greater than a regular credit card gift is the star power of DAF, and we've seen evidence that it's in sometimes the tens of thousands of dollars. So that's the star show. That's why our job as folks helping to inspire people to give is to allow them to give in greater amounts more easily and unlock a lot of what I've seen in the comments are concerns that money is just locked up in DAFs and sitting in them, very unutilized. The hope is by making it that much easier to unlock those dollars that they do. So, just highlighting something I thought is super powerful and potent. Mitch, do we have you? Yes, we can.
Okay. I don't know what happened. My headphones got co-opted, but we're back. Thank you everybody for the alerts. I knew right away. That's super valuable. So I was just saying before I got disconnected there that when donors have an opportunity to give on something like a donation form, or maybe you have a giving day or an event or a bike ride or anything like that, they want to give to that cause, to that page, be recognized, be seen there. And oftentimes with their donor advised fund, that's hard to do in that moment. And so they don't end up using their DAF. And there's research here that I'm pointing out the key stats on that 88% of DAF donors surveyed in a survey of thousands of DAF donors found that 88% give outside of their DAF every year. And that even when you looked at another research piece done by Giving Compass, found that 37% of DAF donors surveyed didn't use their DAF on their most recent donation, not just the whole past year. So it's very common that even though they've set all this money aside and it's tax advantaged and that's what they want to give, they don't. And I think that begs the question of why. And luckily there's been research on this too. When you ask people, well, why didn't you use your DAF in that setting? And the most common responses are things like, it was a spontaneous donation. It was an event I wanted to support while I was there. It was time sensitive. It felt like I needed to give right away and have them get the money right away. Or maybe a new organization I'm not super familiar with, and I didn't want to have to look them up in my DAF portal. So there's just some friction in what we see as inspiration-based giving and DAFs. And that's the real value and unlock of how DAF giving, sitting right in the moments where people have this inspiration, can help make sure your donors that have a DAF are using it. Because I guarantee so many of you already have DAF donors that just aren't using the tool yet and have given to you with a credit card before. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to jump into, now that we understand what DAFs are and what the latest dynamics are in the industry, what is the opportunity? How can we tap into it? I encourage people to think about a proactive DAF strategy. Now, there may be folks that are saying, well, we already get DAF gifts. What do you mean? Why do we need a strategy? that's a passive or responsive DAF strategy, right? Some people are deciding to give to your organization with a DAF, and you receive those gifts offline. And I think it points out an important piece that it's not really up to you if you're ready or not for DAFs. I hear that a lot from organizations. They might say, oh, we're actually not ready for DAFs. We're not doing that yet. That's not your choice. It's the donor's choice. So whether like ready or not, you are going to start getting DAF gifts. What is your choice is if you want to be proactive and how to maximize that opportunity as opposed to reactive and passive with just how gifts show up. And when it comes to being proactive, there's 4 core pieces that you can think about focusing on. One is how can you find more DAF donors? How can you reach them? How can you make sure they're giving to you? How can you make sure your donors, existing donors with DAFs, are making those larger gifts with their DAF? How can you better capture and manage the data related to DAF gifts? I saw some people mention anonymous giving. And so this is a really important piece to make sure you have enough information, and then acknowledging them, stewarding them. That can often be a missing piece for organizations, given the ways that DAF gifts arrive. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of these. I also think it's incredibly important, especially if you are personally interested in this topic, is to put your hand up to be the DAF champion at your organization. Because across all of the organizations that we work with here at Chariot, that is the #1 deciding factor on who succeeds and really stands out and drives more activity, is that there's someone internally that is being the quarterback, or maybe a small group of people. And someone that's committed and empowered is key, and it can come from so many parts of the organization. Like even just, I picked a handful of folks that are on our advisory council here at Chariot, just to show you the spectrum of departments and roles that people come from. People focus in finance, in events and peer-to-peer, in marketing, in operations, in digital and tech. Anyone that is passionate about this topic can be a leader for it, right within your organization. What really matters is that you're interested, that you have a personal interest, which everyone's here. So you probably already checked that box. You showed up to a training, which is great. They have support internally. People are going to help them succeed in trying to push this strategy forward. That they have enough insight or ability to coordinate across some different team members or teams. And that they're proactive. They're going to be the source internally. So they attended a great webinar. They share the takeaways with people. They saw an article. They're passing it along. They're making sure to infuse all that insights into their organization to help everybody think about and be spotting the opportunities. So thinking about how now you're committed, you want to do it, you're empowered, you've got the team support. What does it actually look like to be more engaged with your DAF strategy? It falls into these key areas. When it comes to trying to find them, it's all about marketing and communications, making sure you're auditing your website, your emails, mailers. Are you checking? Do we mention donor advised funds? We'll go through some examples, but that is an easy one that anyone can do, is just take a look ahead, especially at the beginning of the year. Like, what do our campaigns look like? What do our assets look like? Where are we communicating with donors and talking about fundraising, and making sure we have a call out specific to DAFs. Next, when it comes to converting donors, it's all about the technology. Luckily for all, imagine most or many of you are Give Lively customers. It is enabled within your forms, so you are ready to rumble and make the most of it. But that's a key piece there, is how you think about the technology. Then how you're tracking them. What are you doing with that data? How are you managing your history and record of DAF giving? Thinking about your process. And last is how you can expand from there, build good relationships, educate donors about DAFs, have a culture of DAF giving, within your organization and network. So when it comes to marketing and communication, I think I saw a question in the chat a little bit there. So I can spot some of them. They're moving really fast, but I try to see a few of them. So your first order goal is to make sure it's clear to people that you accept DAF gifts. You want them to use their DAF if they have it. And I know that might sound silly and you might think, oh, someone has a DAF. What do they don't know. They don't know they can or should use it. We're human. People need reminders. You are reducing friction by reminding them and encouraging to use their DAF. And I think everyone on your team should be empowered to spot this out, like making sure folks working on a website or donation forms or at your events or maybe working on a mailing, like everyone should know about this opportunity. And we've seen great examples where the DAF champion, we have a case study on this on our website for the public theater here in New York City. Their DAF champion was more on the planned giving and membership side, but she happened to look at a mailer and spotted out where they could be flagging that DAFs can be an option to give. And they ended up having 25% of their gifts for that mailer came in the form of DAFs. So everyone should be looking for and spotting opportunities to mention DAFs and direct them towards the best way to use their DAF to support. Here's just some more examples. We've seen postcards sent in the mail mentioning DAFs specific to something like DAF Day, but also just general fundraising like this flyer from a peer-to-peer event informing people about DAF giving. Live events is another great example where you can direct people to use your DAF and hey, we've even got an easy way for you to finish your gift right here in our forms. And we see other people do similar things in social media even. And then just plan, like, what are the tentpole things throughout the year where you're going to try to, focus or highlight on more of this. Giving Tuesday is obviously a good one. The year-end season in general. Q1, you've got a bunch of people that just filled their DAFs in December when they were doing their year-end tax planning. So they've got it. The coffers are full. It's a good time to ask them, and it's top of mind for them. And then we've got DAF Day coming on October 8th in 2026. So that always happens in early October and can take advantage of that. All right, so when it comes to this converting them, how to further reduce friction in that process, this is exactly where DAF Pay fits in. It is now an embedded checkout option right on Give Lively. And this is just the easiest way. They don't have to give this way. They can go to their portal and you're not forcing your donor to do anything, but you are bringing their attention to a super easy way to finish and complete their gift in 3 clicks. They don't need to leave the form. You get their full donor information directly into your system. That means name and email. I saw a lot of people mention concerns or issues with that. Gifts completed through DAF Pay, through DAF Pay, you're going to get the information you need. And there's a lot of instances where this is incredibly powerful and examples that we have when it comes to peer-to-peer, any type of crisis response or like urgency fundraising campaign. It's just powerful to intercept people when it would have been easier to use a credit card historically. I'll just give a credit card gift for this giving day or at this event. And we saw huge increases in DAF giving when people have this easy, embedded, intuitive option. The next piece here is around data. So a lot of people all ask like, oh, you're interested in DAFs. Do you know how much DAF support you got last year? And they'll look at me like I have 5 heads. They're like, I don't know the answer. I don't know how to get the answer. I don't know who to ask. I don't know where to look in our database. That's a good sign. Like ask your organization that question. How much DAF support did we get last year? If no one can answer it quickly, that means that you've got some work to do, and make sure that you are set up to track DAF giving. And that you have a consistent way to do so, that you're tracking the actual donor's name because that's who you want to thank and steward, but you're also tracking the actual DAF name because that's the legal source of funds. So this is really important to make sure you have a system. Just talk to the team and make sure that you are doing it consistently. This is one framework I've set out here. I care more about adherence to something consistently than necessarily following this line by line. And then lastly, just when I talk about growing DAF giving or growing your DAF donors, first and foremost are the relationships with your current supporters. And if they use a DAF, that you are giving them the best experience ever because they naturally are inclined to have higher retention rates. This is a stat from the DAF fundraising report, 59% and year-over-year retention versus 46% for non-DAF giving. They're naturally loyal. They also, 20% of DAF donors in the study actually gave more than one gift a year. So you don't need to be shy about follow-up solicitations for other things. These are people that give and give often. And if you're into planned giving communications, someone having a DAF is a great planned giving conversation. Have they named a beneficiary for it? Lots of them either have not, or maybe they've only named a family member and they could add an organization there. So driving more of those conversations is great. And I know some people are concerned about more communication and content around DAFs because they think there's some risk, or someone opens a DAF, then does that decrease their giving to us? It's just not true in the data whatsoever, as we talked about today. So not necessarily that you need to encourage or tell your donors to open a DAF. That's not your role. You're not a financial advisor. In fact, if you have a conversation with someone, you should probably disclose that, right? That you're not a financial advisor. Talk to your people before you make any decisions. But it's okay if a donor learns about DAFs from you and learns why people use them and learns what the common value points are, or learns what another one of your donors found valuable about using a DAF to support your organization. They're now associating that with you. They're getting value from you. They're learning about something from you, and you'll be top of mind if and when they use that tool. And the evidence points out that people increase their giving when they adopt a DAF. A couple of my top tips here on DAF donor stewardship. DAF donors get a thank you, not a tax receipt. Very important. It is, like we mentioned earlier, not a tax deductible event when you recommend a grant out of a DAF. I personally think every DAF gift is worth a double click, worth a little extra research. Like, oh, who is that donor? Even if it's a small donation, $50, $100, that could be a lot more there, right? The average gift size is, the average DAF account has hundreds of thousands of dollars in it. And there's often people make small gifts to start with, but that it's a signal there's more there. I think spelling out donor advised funds, if it fits wherever you're using the copy, is often beneficial. You just don't know if that donor is familiar with the acronym DAF, although it's becoming more and more common. I think educating existing donors, we just talked about this, having a place on your website where you explain what a DAF is or how it works. There's so many examples of other organizations that do this well. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Having a ways to give page where you give an overview of DAFs is something many organizations have done and done well. So use some references. If people are curious, I'm happy to share some. But like I said, I think it's good association with your donors to be sharing valuable information. If you're looking for an opportunity to do more of that type of comms, specifically around DAFs, leading up to DAF Day in early October is an awesome way to do so. We put out toolkits and a lot of helpful resources that everyone can leverage. So stay tuned and be paying attention to have DAF Day on your calendar. Last piece here that some folks just don't know, that oftentimes when someone makes a DAF gift, they can still request that gets matched by their employer if they have more traditional gift matching benefits from their employer. All right. Last piece, I just wanted to share a specific story about a partner of ours that we work with who took advantage of knowing about DAF gifts in real time through DAF Pay. And they actually reached out and sent personal thank you emails as soon as they could, within a couple hours. And what they found from analyzing the data around that is that, first of all, 69% of the donors that they saw come in through DAF Pay were brand new. The conversion rate of using the DAF Pay tool was 59%, which is significantly higher than most other payment options. The average gift size was $1,400. And for people who did change the way they give, their average change was 7x. So I think this just speaks to the opportunity here. It's not something to be afraid of or worried that this is going to take a donor this way when they already give with the DAF. There is so much opportunity for finding new donors or converting your existing donors that use a credit card and getting them to make much larger gifts. That is really the focus here. So I'll finish up here with a little checklist that everyone can take a picture of or take home. auditing communications for donor advised fund callouts. Where are opportunities to do that? Converting them, make it easy. Make sure that you have DAF Pay Live on your donation forms. Look at your DAF data, try to audit that. If you have questions, the DAF fundraising report is an amazing resource that has these templates and guides around data management, and that you have those shared rules internally. And then focus on these relationships, like quick thank yous, specific asks, like speak to your DAF donors a little bit distinctly versus your general donor base, because they present such a big opportunity. All right. Sorry you had to hear from me for a long time. I'm going to take a drink of water. Were there questions in the Q&A that would be helpful for me to speak to, David, or anyone on the Give Lively team, before we jump into next steps?
It's a very active Q&A. Um, I think, I think some of the questions might have preceded some of the answers that you then gave, Mitch, but it seemed like there were a lot of questions around, is DAF, are we looking to encourage people to create DAFs, or are we looking to unlock, like there's a lot of, let's call it like high level concern about DAF as a function, meaning why is so much money locked up in DAF? And my understanding is that there's no requirement that DAF holders spend that money or donate that money, but by using a product like DAF Pay that makes it easy to tap into that money, we simply encourage something that's already happening.
Yeah, and thank you for raising that. That's a really good one to dig into. While there is no like IRS federally mandated payout requirement for DAFs like we see for private foundations, almost every major DAF provider that I've encountered, and I work with most of them, has their own internal rules about account usage. Meaning like Fidelity Charitable, if you go a year without making a gift, they reach out to you and encourage you to make one. If you go a second year without making a donation, they start to automatically grant out 5% of your account. And pretty much every provider has some internal rule so that there is no situation where money is sitting in there long term. The other piece that's important is just, if there isn't that kind of, we don't have that mandated rule, what is the actual performance? What is the actual payout rates? And they are significantly higher than that 5% rule we see on private foundations, right? The payout rate annually has been above 20% since they started tracking it 15 years ago. I think just last year was around 25%. That's really substantial. And it also, I think, comes down to the psychology we talked about and the benefits of using a DAF, and they're generally not seen as permanent capital. It's not like an endowed foundation where people want that vehicle to live forever. It's a wallet for them to manage their giving and optimize their taxes that results in people being more generous. And the last piece I would just, it's semantics, but I think like thinking about money as locked up in DAFs or it's just sitting there, it's not really accurate, because something really important has happened with that money. That individual has irrevocably committed it to an account where the only thing they can use it for is to make donations to qualified charities. So it's actually taken a really important step forward towards that ultimate giving decision, as opposed to each individual donation someone's about to make having to think through, well, how much do I want to budget for this? Do I want that on my credit card this month? Do I want that on my bank account? And there's too many decisions there. It removes so much friction to giving. And so I think the focus should be, what about the trillions of dollars that people haven't irrevocably committed donations, right? Like money moving into DAF accounts is moving closer to your mission out of the general investment world. That's a positive thing, so long as the grant making and throughput is robust, which it absolutely is. So I would just encourage people to think about a bit of a reframe there and that opportunity. And with that is to not have any fear of donors learning about DAFs. Because if a donor is learning about a DAF from an organization they love and support, they're not going to go lock up a bunch of money there and not use it, right? They're learning about how it helps and use it for giving, and likely increasing their giving, which is what all the data points to.
There were two other kinds of questions that I think are fairly common. One was around timing of. It sounded like a few people who had been recipients of DAF gifts felt like there was quite a long delay between the point in which someone made the gift and when that gift was actually received by the org. And my understanding is that's a lot of really the DAF itself, not Chariot. It's not Give Lively, but maybe you can shed some light on that, Mitch.
Yeah, so it's important that when someone uses DAF Pay, they are facilitating the process through which they initiate a grant request in their portal. It's simple. They can do it right in the donation form and at checkout. The DAFs are all going to send those gifts however they do. And we can't control that. There's 1,000 of them. We do offer tools for DAFs to also send their gifts faster, electronically, securely. We're working to onboard more of them, but it's not all of them. What's important is that you know that gift was initiated through DAF Pay. You know that it's coming. You know who the donor is. You've got a tracking ID so you can match up to when that gift actually arrives and make the gift processing piece easier. But you're right that there is a lot of variability depending on the DAF provider, and they send gifts in different ways, which are inherently going to have different timelines, right? Like DAF Giving 360 still sends everything as a check in the mail, whereas Fidelity Charitable has an option to sign up for electronic fund transfer. So they can all come in different ways. We're working on ways for nonprofits to improve that gift processing experience too. But it definitely is a unique challenge related to DAF giving versus other payment methods.
Another question that seemed very common, we describe DAF, those who hold DAF accounts as almost like magical pots of money that we can tap into. And there's a lot of wonderful promise and generosity that could be unlocked there. But a lot of the questions were, what are even some ideas of how to identify who might have a DAF, right? Like people don't come forth and say, hey, I'm a DAF. Well, many people are unlikely to come forth and identify themselves as DAF holders. So are there ways, is it, advertising the option? Is there direct ask? Is there any best practice there?
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about, that's such a wide spectrum of people that use DAFs. So there's no surefire litmus test to know. I would say the best thing you can do is put the option to use their DAF in front of them, right? Either with the language in your communications, the payment option, your donation forms. Then people self-select to tell you and show you that they have a DAF and they want to use it to support you. So I don't know that I would spend a ton of time trying to analyze your donor base and figure out who has a DAF, because if you're trying to do that so that you can only send communications to people that might have a DAF, it's so imprecise. And also there's no harm in communicating about DAFs to a broader audience. Like if they don't have one and they don't care, it goes right over their head. No harm, no foul. If they do have a DAF, you've really spoken to them what they value, their experience. So you've really got that donor, which is great. And if they don't have a DAF, but they're interested, you're now providing them value. You're telling them about a tool they could be using. So I just wouldn't overthink how to find those DAF donors. I think if you're infusing this into your general communications and fundraising, it will get the job done.
And it sounds like and I believe we just have 1 minute left. There was a question about DAF on Give Lively, which, everyone on this call who is a Give Lively member should have DAF available to them today and turned on by default. It can be turned off if you wish, with just a click, but the process of actually receiving DAF gifts is something that should be seamless and automatic. The process of claiming your Chariot account does have a few steps associated with it. And Mitch, what's the best way for people to get support with issues regarding setting up their Chariot account? There was a couple questions about how to reach support.
Yeah, so we are very active, monitor both contact at givechariot.com and support at givechariot.com. So our team is all here reviewing those all the time. So I'll drop them into the chat right now so people have it. Either one works. And that's going to be your best bet.
That's great. I know there were a lot of other questions, and it sounds like, or looks like, some of the folks on the chat are still answering those questions. But I think we're at time. Thank you so much, Mitch, for helping us walk through the wonderful world of DAF and all of its delicious complexities. And thank you all who've stayed on and asked really important questions and prompted discussions about DAF as a concept and how DAF may be implemented in your org and orgs of all sizes. I don't know if Mitch or Mike were going to wrap up the rest of the call.
I can say,
there we go.
yeah, there we go. I can say the final thank yous to everyone, the final goodbyes. Thank you, David. Thank you so much, Mitch, for joining us. Thank you to the many thousands of people who joined today's call. As far as next steps, yes, everyone will receive a follow-up email with the replay and the recording. If you are interested in learning more about Give Lively, please sign up and attend one of our free weekly demos. We have a brand new newsletter out called Breakthrough. Ask us more about that. And please follow us on socials, LinkedIn, Facebook. So thank you all so much and have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.